The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Hebert, Director of Communications here at Saney's, and welcome to another Lunch and Learn in our ongoing Financial Friday series. Saney's is excited to offer these sessions in cooperation with our corporate partner, AXA. AXA has a long-standing presence in New York, and a large portion of AXA's New York client base is built upon the work they do within the public education system. Through AXA, Saney's members can receive competitive insurance rates and a full array of retirement services, including a complimentary financial profile for Saney's members, which we urge you to take advantage of. It's a really great benefit. So our AXA presenter today is Nick Agulia, East Region Vice President for the AXA Retirement Benefits Group. Now, before we get started, please note that all participants are muted during the session, but we will have Q&A at the end. So if you have a question, just type it into your questions panel in your GoToWebinar panel there, and we'll get to those after Nick's presentation. We're also recording the session, and we'll send a copy of that recording along with presentation materials to all attendees. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nick.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you for everybody for attending our college planning presentation. As Michelle mentioned, my name is Nick Agulia, and I am the Vice President of the East Region of AXA Advisors, located here in Buffalo, New York. So hope everybody is having a great day. This is the college planning topic is meant to be a little bit more of just a basic overview. However, I think that by the end of the presentation, there should be some pretty good information that everybody can take away from this. Hopefully some questions or concerns that people may have had about college planning, I can hopefully put the rest or just elaborate on a little bit more in depth. So college planning is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, having 3 children myself, all under the age of 11. It is something that I looked into pretty early on, and I wanted to make sure that I, within my means, was able to set things up properly to give them the best opportunities to attend the colleges of their choice without really burdening them with too much additional debts and loans and other responsibilities. So the basic program overview, we're going to talk a little bit today about the current college environment, a little bit more about sources of college funding, different education planning options, what next steps are for somebody who is interested or at that stage where they're looking at planning for college for a kid, and also talk a little bit more about our AXA Achievement Scholarship Program that we offer to high school juniors and seniors across the states. So, of course, what would a financial presentation be without some statistics first? So starting off, in the fall of 2017, so a couple years ago, but about 20.4 million students were expected to attend American colleges and universities. So I think everybody on the call, we could all understand the importance and the value of continuing our higher education. 70% of all undergraduates received some type of financial aid, while about 63% received grants, 38% took out loans, 5% received aid through work-study programs, 3% received federal veterans education benefits, and about 4% had parents who took out other types of direct federal loans or federal plus loans for them. So one of the things that we hear is that college is getting expensive. So I'll have conversations with people, and again, it just comes up all the time in conversation, that college is expensive, it's getting more expensive, which it is, but what does that really mean? So this chart right here just shows the differences and how much, first of all, a public school versus a private school costs, but also how much that cost has increased throughout the decades. So if we were looking back on a 4-year public college, 10 years ago, it was about $7,280 for a public 4-year school. For a private, it was about $27,520. Fast forward 10 years, and those numbers have gone up substantially. So what does this mean? It means that we need to be aware of the rising costs. The cost of college has gone up at a more rapid pace than inflation. So on average, about 3.2% more than inflation, to be exact. So what that means is that if we have kids, whether it's us, whether it's grandkids or nieces or nephews, and we want to provide some sort of education to them or some sort of assistance, or maybe it's even the kids that are in our schools, So providing them and their families and their parents with just this education and overview of making sure that they are aware of some of the programs, some of the opportunities that are out there for them to be able to save, to be proactive, and to have some sort of plan in place. So there's a lot of different ways that college can be funded. Scholarships is a big one. However, as popular as scholarships are in guidance offices and through conversation, in 2016 and 2017, it was estimated that only about 6% of undergraduate students received some sort of privately funded scholarships. So while they're out there, they're a topic of conversation, a lot of students are not either applying for them, aren't eligible for them, or aren't receiving them. There's also grants and loans. So the Pell Grants are available, but the problem with many of the grants, including the Pell Grants, is that they're awarded to families maybe that have a little bit of a lower income. Typically, it's families that have incomes below $50,000. So as incomes continue to rise and the cost of college continues to rise, it's covering less and less for individuals, and less families are eligible to receive those types of grants. Student loans, obviously one of the main sources that individuals or families will use to help fund college costs. So loans sometimes seem attractive for people in the beginning, but they can also come with some consequences. I'm sure many people are aware of the burden that student loans and higher interest rates can have on somebody's overall financial picture once they're in their 20s and 30s, and in some cases 40s and beyond. So what education planning options are available? And this is where I think there's a lot of miscommunication. Every time I do these talks across the states in different settings, I'll always get people ask me questions, or they'll have information that just a lot of times isn't accurate. So we try to make sure that we, again, maybe dispel some of the myths that are out there. So there's really three mainstream types of savings, or different accounts that people can utilize for education planning. There's a lot more, but these are the three main ones. So there's accounts called UGMA or UTMA accounts, and those are just uniform gift to minors accounts, or uniform transfer to minors accounts. And pretty much all that means is they're custodial accounts that enables minors to own securities. So the minor, whoever the child is, would own the account, and they would own the investments inside of the account. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into these as well in a second. Coverdell education savings plans, really not used as much anymore. They were popular years ago. They're starting to die out, being replaced more so by the 529 plans and the UGMA accounts. And then a 529 plan is going to be a state-operated investment plan. And really the benefit in New York State and most other states is there's some sort of tax savings associated with that. So whether it's a tax deduction up front, whether it's tax-free growth, and again, we'll dive a little bit more deeper into New York State's specifics. But first, let's talk about the UGMA and the UTMA account. So the advantages are there's no income limits, meaning that it doesn't matter how much income a family makes, they can contribute pretty much as they want to these UGMA and UTMA accounts. There are some gifting restrictions, which is another conversation, but there's no limit as to how much can go into the account per year. In addition, the other advantages are the custodian has direct investment decisions. So obviously, if you're opening up an account for a minor, you wouldn't expect a 4-year-old to be the one managing their own account. So whomever the account is, whoever the custodian is, they're the ones at their discretion can choose how the account is set up, how the account is invested. There's also some limitations or some negatives, though, with using these types of accounts for college. So first of all, the minor gains control of the funds at the age of majority. So the one problem with this is that legally the account becomes the ownership and the property of the child. So if they decide that, I'm not going to use this for college, they technically don't have to use it for college. They have discretion as to what they want to use those funds for. Also, contributions are not tax deductible. So there's really no good tax benefits or tax savings associated with these types of accounts. The really only benefit is that they're flexible, meaning that if somebody decides that this was an account that we put money in and we saved for our kids and we don't want to use it for college, maybe we want to use it for a wedding down the road, or maybe we want to use it for their first vehicle. There's more flexibility with what the funds can be used for. And I'll say really the biggest disadvantage of it is the negative effects that it has on financial aid. And this is a big one that I see a lot, and it's a big mistake that unfortunately people make, and sometimes they find out when it's too late. So any custodial account that's in a child's name, whether it's a savings or checking account at your local credit union, typically would be a savings account, but a savings account at your local credit union or local bank, whether it's an investment account like one of these custodial accounts, the money in the account is counted as the student's assets. So what that means is when the student goes to apply for financial aid and they are completing their FAFSA form, that money is counted against them. It's weighted much, much higher and much, much more negatively towards the student than if the asset was in the parent's name. And the way I like to explain this is that if anybody's familiar with maybe on the back end of life when you have long-term care planning, in order for somebody who maybe needs some sort of long-term care planning or needs to go into a nursing home or skilled nursing facility, the state, the nursing home, Medicare, Medicaid, they're going to look at somebody's overall assets. And I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the term spending down your assets. The state, the nursing home, they're going to require that somebody spend down their assets before they'll give them any type of government funding. It's very, very similar when you're looking at college planning. A lot of the grants, a lot of the subsidized loans won't be available to students who have too much assets in their name. So I'll commonly come across situations where maybe an aunt or grandparents set up a custodial account for one of their children. And don't get me wrong, it's a wonderful thing if a grandparent, if an aunt wants to give money. There's an efficient way to do it and then an inefficient way to do it. And in some cases, I've come across students who should have received financial aid that unfortunately were disqualified from receiving that aid because the way that the money that was given to them by auntie or grandma was set up, it was set up in the child's name and counted against them negatively. And they were forced to drain down that money first before any type of subsidized loans or any type of financial aid was given out. So next, let's talk about 529 plans. There's a lot of moving parts with 529 plans, but 529 college savings plans are really the mainstream college funding or college savings source, I'll say. So there's a lot of advantages. There's very few limitations and very few disadvantages. So some of the advantages are any contributions that you make to a New York 529 college savings plan, you get a New York State tax deduction. So this is huge, especially for anybody that just had their taxes done. If you found you were in a situation where maybe you owed New York State a little bit of money or didn't get as much of a refund that you thought you were going to obtain, this is a great way, in addition to some other savings, to be able to lower your New York State taxable income. In addition, money in the 529 account grows tax-free. So this is a huge advantage versus other types of savings plans. Even for people who have money in a savings account, even though the interest is minimal right now, that minimal interest that somebody receives is taxable. Money in the 529 plan grows tax-free. As long as the money is withdrawn and used for college or college-related expenses through an accredited higher education facility, then all of the withdrawals, which include the growth, the gains, and the interest, come out of the account 100% tax-free. So this is, again, one of the biggest advantages of using a 529 plan for college savings. Now, there are some limitations with it. One of the limitations being is that there are limited investment options, which, again, isn't really a terrible thing. New York State does a pretty good job of managing the plan. The advisor-guided plan is through JP Morgan. JP Morgan does a pretty good job offering a wide range of investment options. Very rarely do I ever come across a situation where one of those options isn't suitable for somebody. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a second, but JP Morgan and New York State offer a age-based savings option, which tends to fit very, very well into most people's objectives. The account's professionally managed, so there's less direct investment control. I wouldn't consider this a negative, But what this means is that you're limited to the options, again, that JP Morgan is providing within the plan through New York State. Generally higher fees than other options. There is probably a slightly higher expense. It doesn't have to be, but in some cases there's a slightly higher fee with the New York 529 plan than if you just had money maybe in a CD or money in a savings account. However, again, the tax benefits that are received in almost all cases are going to far outweigh that slightly higher expense that's associated with a 529 plan. Again, one of the other big advantages of doing a 529 plan is any money in the 529 plan technically has a positive effect on financial aid, meaning it is considered an asset of the parent as opposed to the student. So when doing the FAFSA form, it doesn't get weighted nearly as much as the other option, and it doesn't count against the student nearly as much. So it's much, much more advantageous if it's intended, if money is intended to be used for college, to do it through a 529 plan than doing it through, again, a custodial account or a savings account. So there's some additional advantages, a couple of which we talked about briefly already. The individual who contributes to the account has control over the funds. You have choice, so the funds can be used for any accredited institution. And this doesn't just mean your typical 2-year, 4-year college. I recently was working with a family whose daughter had decided not to go the traditional college route. And we were actually able to use the funds in the 529 plan for a local massage therapy school that she was able to get a certification through. So it provides more options than just your traditional, let's say, state schools. Also gives you a lot of flexibility with the 529 plan. So one of the biggest misconceptions that I hear, and I'll hear stories and I'll talk to people and I'll hear everything from, well, I don't want to do a 529 college plan because if my kid doesn't go to school, then I lose all the money. The state takes it all away from me. Or the financial company keeps all the money, or just all this misinformation. And I'm not quite sure kind of where it started or how it all got about there. But none of that is accurate. First of all, there's a lot of flexibility with 529 plans. So if one child decides not to go to school, funds can be redirected to another family member. And it's a pretty simple process. So if there's 2 children or 3 children, you can switch the accounts, the beneficiary on the account, back and forth between the kids and use it for whomever is going to need it. You can actually also change the beneficiary to a parent. So I have worked with people in the past whose children did not go to college, and the parent actually changed the beneficiary over to themselves. They used it to further their education. And I believe in the one case I had recently, there was an individual who was a registered nurse, and she was going back to get her nurse practitioner, her master's in her nurse practitioner license. So she had used the funding that they had put aside for her kids for herself. It's very easy to start saving into a 529 college savings plan. So JP Morgan offers a very, very low minimum balance requirement, or a very low minimum initial contribution. There's also a very low monthly contribution amount for individuals who wanted to save into it monthly. And then really one of the big advantages too is professional management. So this is where working with somebody, working with an advisor, working with some sort of accredited investment representative who can help choose the different investments, help choose the right plan based off of somebody's overall goals, circumstances, and objectives. Now, circling back to the flexibility real quick too, the other thing that I did want to add with that is that in the event that somebody is in a situation where they have a 529 plan and none of the kids are going to go to school and the parents don't want to use it for school, then all that happens is the owner of the account, which in most cases was the parent, gets to withdraw the money from the account. They get a check sent out to them in the mail for whatever the account balance is. There's going to be a slight penalty and a little bit of taxes that are going to be assessed on any of the gains. And again, some people start to look at this and say, well, there's the negative right there. That's the disadvantage, but not really. Because if you look at it, when you put money into the 529 account, you got a tax break up front. New York State gave somebody a tax break under the assumption it was going to be used for a specific circumstance. Plus the money grew tax-free the whole time it was in the account. So really, it's not a negative. All the government is doing, all the IRS is doing is they're saying, hey, remember those benefits we gave you, those tax breaks we gave you? We're just going to take them back because you didn't use the account for what you said you were going to use it for. So most people are receiving back what they put into it in addition to any gains or growth that was inside of the account. So talking a little bit more about the fees or other related considerations with the 529 plans, we touched upon this already. With the 529 plan, there is going to be a minimal administrative fee or a management fee that would apply to the plan. Usually it's going to be assessed by whichever company the individual state chooses to manage the plan. As I referenced before, New York State goes through JP Morgan for their advisor-guided 529 plan. Now, again, this is not a terrible thing that there's a little fee associated to it, because the tax breaks that are associated with this type of account for most people in most situations are going to far outweigh the small management fee that's associated with it. So it's still in a lot of cases, again, is more advantageous from a FAFSA and financial aid standpoint and from a tax standpoint than putting money in a custodial account or maybe putting money in a savings account would be. Other considerations, so withdrawals from 529 plans. So withdrawing money from a 529 plan is actually extremely simple. All somebody would have to do when the time came to take money out is figure out exactly where the money needs to be sent to. So typically the university will have a specific location, a specific address, and usually you'll reference a student ID number. All you have to do, or all somebody has to do to take money out, is to call their financial professional or to call JP Morgan directly, give them the instructions, and JP Morgan will send the check directly over to whatever institution we request them to send the funding over to. So it's a very, very simple process. It makes it very convenient from a tax perspective because money's moving directly from the account right over to the financial institution. So you don't have to keep receipts. You don't have to keep proof that you spent money on certain areas. Things to consider wrapping up here with college planning. So first of all, for somebody that wants to take a look at college planning and wants to maybe be proactive with it, planning ahead is going to be one of the best options. Prices are going to continuously go up. Student loans are going to continuously get more burdensome for individuals. So having some sort of plan in place based off of somebody's specific situation is going to put themselves, the family, as well as the kids in the best position and give them the best opportunity to maximize their funding, their aid, and minimize the burden that they retire from college with. Also, keep a realistic view of loans and free money. And I think most people do a pretty good job of this, but there's still a lot of people, that I'll talk to, and they want to take loans for everything. And it's loans, 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 and they defer everything and don't worry about paying it back, and the interest just keeps accruing. And then all of a sudden, once you finish college, once you're at that first job or the second job, and you're in your 20s or your 30s, maybe you have a family, maybe you're trying to buy a house, all of this student loan debt and the interest and the payments become extremely burdensome. So again, just trying to find ways to maximize these grants, these scholarships, these college savings, and really look at loans as maybe a last option, we'll say. We talked about, again, a little bit already, financial aid being a big one. One of the ways to really maximize financial aid is going to be through just taking advantage of these different types of savings accounts and making sure that we have the right types of accounts set up so that we're not negatively impacting ourselves or not negatively impacting our children when it comes to trying to apply for financial aid. Scholarships. So scholarships, there are a ton out there. I personally volunteer for a local non-for-profit. We have a scholarship program, and it's a smaller one. We're a community-based organization. We try to give away about $1,000 a year in scholarships. And I think this past year we had 2 students apply for the scholarship. And it's kind of surprising. And some of the responses when talking to students that I received was, well, $1,000 isn't a lot of money. So they don't bother writing the essay. And I don't know if that's something that's a one-off or if that's something that is becoming a little bit more prevalent. Regardless, there are a ton of resources, a ton of scholarships that are out there. Sometimes it just requires a little bit of homework, maybe on the student's part, hopefully on the student's part, maybe on the family's part, to try and identify some of these different opportunities. Most of the guidance counselors, the guidance departments at the local high schools do a phenomenal job of disseminating this information and working with students and families on it. We talked about the different grants already. The grants are great. Again, there are income limitations and there are reward limitations to a lot of the grants. Also, a lot of the grants are first come, first served basis. So there's only so much money to go around. And for people that don't apply right away, unfortunately, sometimes they're not receiving anything. Part-time job during college. This is something that's a little bit of a touchy subject. I never like telling students or telling families that their kids should get a part-time job, but it's definitely something to think about. Different parents, different families have very different views of college, what it means, who should pay for it, what the college experience should look like. But if somebody is in a situation where they can pick up a part-time job during college, start paying down some of those student loans or start paying this college directly to limit the amount of loans that they have taken out. I mean, that should go without saying, but it's obviously going to put them in a much better situation for down the road. And then really, again, just planning and funding it now. As I mentioned, I have 3 kids. One of the first things that I did, other than getting life insurance when I got married and had kids, was setting up a 529 college savings plan for them. In some years, I wasn't able to fund it as much as I liked to. Other years, I was able to put a decent amount into it. So it gives you the flexibility of saving what you want to save, when you want to save, in the most tax efficient way. And it's going to most positively benefit the students when it comes college time. Next steps. So next steps really just starts with getting a plan in place. So recommend for somebody who hasn't talked about this yet, who hasn't met with anybody yet, to maybe sit down and have a conversation about what college should look like. Who's going to be paying for college? Are there different views that different families have? Do they want to try to contribute as much as possible? Are they going to fund maybe minimal? Were loans the plan? Maybe just re-examining whatever strategy was currently set up and seeing if maybe there's some additional options or some additional thoughts that a financial professional or a college planner can maybe add some value on. Because a lot of times there's different plans, different programs, different situations that a lot of times people don't necessarily always think about. Lastly, I'm going to go to AXA Achievement. So AXA Achievement, some people may be aware of this already, but AXA has a philanthropic component called the AXA Foundation. AXA Foundation gives about $1.4 million a year in scholarships over to high school juniors and seniors. So far, we've awarded over $25 million total to more than 6,000 students nationwide. So it is a great scholarship program that we offer to schools. Again, one of the many different scholarship programs that are out there. We try to, in the different communities, do a very good job of getting into the school districts in August, September, October, setting up a time with guidance and making sure they have all of the information on how to apply, how it's awarded, what the cutoff is, and just giving them posters and flyers to have that information available to them. So with that being said, that is the end of the college planning seminar. Again, meant more as just a basic overview, but hopefully there were some good, at least a few good takeaways from the conversation or from the talk today. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to do my best to try to answer those now.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. That was great. Do we have any questions? I'm not seeing any in the question panel at this time, so I'll give it a minute and see if anyone wants to type anything in there. If not, like I said, this session has been recorded and I will be posting it at sanews.org and we'll send it out to everyone as well along with the presentation. So you can certainly follow up later at your convenience with AXA and look at those materials again as you need them. I think we're good for the day, Nick. It was so comprehensive. There are no questions.
Well, thank you very much for the time. And like I said, hopefully there were some good takeaways that everybody was able to, to get from the time.
Okay, thanks so. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.